You know, you'd think that book would fall down.
Go, I'm not getting any younger over here.
Oh. The Constitution of the United States of America, Article 1, Section 2. The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. No person shall be a representative who shall not have attained to the age of 25 years, and been 7 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state in which he shall be chosen. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union, according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole numbers of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States, and within every subsequent term of 10 years, in such manner as they shall by law direct. The number of representatives shall not exceed one for every 30,000 people, but each state shall have at least one representative. Until such enumeration shall be made, the state of New Hampshire shall be entitled to choose 3, Massachusetts 8, Rhode Island and Providence Plantations 1, Connecticut 5, New York 6, New Jersey 4, Pennsylvania 8, Delaware 1, Maryland 6, Virginia 10, North Carolina 5, South Carolina 5, and Georgia 3. When vacancies happen in the representation from any state, the executive authority thereof shall issue writs of election to fill such vacancies. The House of Representatives shall choose their speaker and other officers, and shall have the sole power of impeachment. That is the text. Researching this blew me away, folks. This is probably the most glaring example of why the founders wanted us to be a nation of laws, not men. And yet this section made it into the Constitution as is because they thought they couldn't get it ratified without it. The literature says it was debated hotly. It is the key section to the Constitution which gives you the power that you are supposed to hold over our government. But I seriously doubt they knew it would be abused in the way it was for over 170 years. The Constitution had to be ratified. Our country was weak. Our government couldn't last in the state it was in. The slave states were part of the country, and the abolition states were not strong enough to fight another war at the time. I personally think if they had known what was to come, they might have fought harder on this section. However, this was the first step towards the abolition of slavery in this country. In fact, the Continental Congress, read that as old government, did in this very same year outlaw slavery in all new states. The phrasing of this section was clearly to lead towards abolition, but oh boy, did they not take into account the condition of man. Far too much power was handed to men, not laws, and I'll show you what I mean. The members of the House shall, when you see shall, read it as must or will. It is a demand, not a request. Be elected each 2 years. Their short terms were meant to be self-correcting mechanisms. They envisioned any bad representatives would be voted out by their constituency. There really isn't another way to practically to remove a House member other than they be kicked out by their fellow members. Since the House has sole power of impeachment, and good luck with that one. It goes on to say, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. This was the problem, not the 3/5 thing that everybody focuses on. That was actually done to limit the slave states' power in the federal government. In fact, even that wouldn't have been necessary if this half sentence hadn't been there, because just declare the slave citizens and boom. Not only that, the 15th and 19th Amendments wouldn't have been necessary. You see, without that half sentence, every citizen over 21 would have been a voter in the federal elections, regardless of gender or race. And by the way, don't kid yourselves, some black people had the vote in this country at the time until they didn't. Both freed slaves and regular immigrants. Next, double negative. 30 lawyers, 5 politicians, 2 teachers, and we get this clumsy language. Wow. It says your representative to be eligible for election has to be a citizen of your state, at least 25 years old, and a citizen of the United States for a minimum of 7 years. Next clause is the constitutional law that began the census. When you hear someone talking about the enumeration clause, this is it. But in order for all people to have the same amount of power, you actually have to know how many people there actually are and where they are located to set the district boundaries. It is straightforward and important. This was the start of the U.S. Census, and for equal representation, it really had to be done. It's required every 10 years, and California's loss of a representative in the last apportionment illustrates it quite well. We must be represented equally. This is so important that the Supreme Court has rejected districting with as little as a 1% difference. Problem is, everyone gets hung up on that 3/5 thing. Don't. It was an attempt to limit the power of the slaveholding states. In fact, the representatives for the slave states wanted to count the slaves for representation, but not count them for taxation. So the 3/5 thing was a compromise. It's actually called the 3/5 compromise. 3/5 for representation, 3/5 for taxation, and no new slaves to be imported after 1808. That's Article 1, Section 8. They didn't actually know how many people there were or where they were, so this last bit was a best guess estimate to seat the first Congress, who in turn were to start the census as one of their first actions. It goes on to say when a vacancy occurs in the House, your governor must set an election to replace the vacancy as quickly as possible. The reason for this is you must be represented equally in Congress. As I said before, we are the government, and we must have our say in the laws through our representatives. There's definitely some urgency in this. The last clause says the House shall choose their speaker and other officers. It's an old spelling, not a misspelling. But more importantly, it doesn't say that those officers or speaker has to be chosen from the membership of the House. And it says only the House of Representatives has the power to impeach. By this, they meant any impeachment in the federal government. Why? Because you elected them. Only you, through your representative, can unelect them. You are the government. What I really want to say about this section would lose my G rating on YouTube. A truck driver, I assure you, my language can be quite colorful. And this one half of a sentence in combination with the enumeration clause has caused so much trouble that it took no less than 4 amendments, dozens of federal laws, and 183 years to fix it. Instead, I will say never underestimate people's abilities to be complete jerks. My Native American friends, the enumeration clause may have given your tribes their tax-free status, but it meant terrible things for your ability to vote. For instance, people living on reservations in Colorado were eligible to vote for the very first time in 1970. I don't think I have to tell you other persons meant slaves. Continental Congress ban on slavery in the Northwest Territories in concert with the 3/5 compromise were a step towards the abolition of slavery. But it would take another 75 years and a bloody war to finally dislodge it for good. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of this section's story either. That pesky sentence tying the voter eligibility for your federal representatives to the voter eligibility of your state representatives meant something wholly terrible even after the slaves were freed. See, it wasn't enough that they had stolen these people's lives. They couldn't have let it alone. They went about stealing their futures as well by changing the rules for electors in their states. Slavery is evil. This slavery was even more terrible for a simple reason. Unlike the slavery that had existed for thousands of years before this, you had a combination of people enslaved who did not look like the people enslaving them, in combination with laws in the slave states making it illegal to educate them or even teach them to read. There you go. Instant racism once they're freed. Slavery is evil, but racism is a dark, venomous snake that infects everything it touches, and it spreads. Institutional slavery died in the United States in 1865. It took another 100 years to finally stamp out the worst of it with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and a couple more decades for us to finally hit on the idea of just not giving racism any more oxygen. There is one race, the human race. One last thing. You're pulling up your boots to get on that high horse about how you would have been different back then. Spare me. Unscrupulous politicians are attempting to revive racism right now. They're doing it to divide you from your neighbors, to distract you from the fact that they simply do not have good ideas. They want you busy looking for invisible boogeymen while they consolidate power. It gets worse. Slavery is not dead. It exists even today in dozens of countries around the world. Scrolling here is a list of the worst offending countries still tolerating or actively engaged in slavery today. I'm still not done. Slavery exists in this country right now, mostly in the form of human trafficking, women and children in the sex trafficking industry. It is a billion-dollar industry, more pervasive than you ever could imagine. I guess it's fitting that a trucker bring this to you, since for some reason my industry has been tapped to fight this evil. You can help. If you suspect someone is being trafficked, text their location to 233-733 or befree. You can go to the website above and in the description to learn the signs of human trafficking. If you are being trafficked, all QT truck stops are registered safe places where you can be protected and get something to eat while a safe place representative comes to help. In fact, if you can get into any truck stop, ask any employee there to dial 911. The police will help you. Thank you for watching. Please keep yourself free and keep the dirty side down, my friends. See you next time.